Oh, that was a little hard. This is my new mobility scooter. So we have that to look forward to. I was trying to get around in the shop, get something done around here, get out of Mrs. W's hair, and I found this little roll around cart with a tool tray in the bottom. And it's been actually been very helpful. All right, so I'm going to recreate what happened. As you guys probably know, they've been following, I broke my my leg up right near my left leg, right near the joint. I fell out of the back of the truck, basically. I didn't realize how many guys get hurt and injured falling off of tailgates, and actually how lucky I got. I fell onto concrete and wasn't able to catch myself, and so all the weight of my body at tailgate height, which is pretty high on my truck, hit right on my hip, and that's what happened. So let's go over and show you what I did, and we'll talk a little bit about Chesterton's Fence. I've recreated here for you the scene of the attack. What happened was it was about 9 o'clock at night, and I had my snow bike loaded up. We were getting ready. It was dumping snow. We're getting ready for like the biggest ride of the year. All the boys were all ready to go. We were going to meet at my place in the morning, and I was just getting ready for bed, and I thought, you know what? I should change the oil on that bike. I had 2 rides on it. I don't like to go more than 2 rides without dropping the oil on it, and I thought, I got to do it. It'll bug me. So I ran out here. It was snowing like crazy, probably 9:30 or so. Threw the ramp up there, needed to pull the bike. I was going to pull the bike out, drop the oil, ran up the ramp, and it just dropped out from underneath me. Obviously, I hadn't set it properly because I didn't take the time to strap it down. It was the second time I haven't done that, and I cut corners because I thought, well, I'm going to unload it, and it's not going to spit it out, so it's not going to be a big deal. And here we have what could have been and could be a life-changing injury for just being in a hurry. Let me show you what I'm talking about. As bad as all this is, do you know what the absolute worst part of the whole deal is? This is an example of the screw that they used to put my femur back together. I've got 3 of these in me. They're about 3 inches long, and they're metric. Now, I have essentially become the physical embodiment of the metric system, and I'm still wrestling with that. I don't really know what the ramifications are. I haven't completely flushed that out, but I have no doubt that it's not going to be a happy ending. Anyway, that's the way we are. That's the way it is, and I was unable to source an SAE option anyway, and it might not be worth going back in and replacing them. So there we have it. That's what we got. All right, so this is a snow bike specific ramp, and loading snow bikes it's kind of gnarly because they've got the tracks and the skis, and it's always slippery and icy and snow and such, and so it's got these special design treads and tracks that mesh and tie in really well with the cleats on the sled itself, and it folds up so you can deal with it, and it's a really well-designed ramp. Now, when I bought this, the manufacturer was very clear and told me there's something very important about this ramp, and it's these tabs right here. Do you see these? They said don't use the ramp unless you take a tie-down strap, like a motorcycle tie-down strap, and you lash this to the bumper or to the rear hitch. Why? Well, typically the problem manifests when you're loading. So as you're loading, you're using the throttle to help move this machine up the ramp, right? And it's tying in here. Well, it's wanting to spit that ramp out. And if you're standing on it and you give it some gas, you can literally just spit the ramp out and off it goes, and you go down and the bike falls on you, and you can imagine, right? So they've mitigated, or they've eliminated that by experience, hard-fought experience. Obviously somebody fell and realized that by putting that strap on there. And this was the second time that I hadn't used it. Now, the reason why I didn't use it is I remember having the argument in my mind because I was in a hurry. And I thought, well, I don't need to put that strap on there because I'm not loading, I'm unloading. And there is no pressure from the bike wanting to spit it out. It should be a pretty straightforward deal. And last time I unloaded it, there was no problem. It didn't fall off. Had I taken a moment to put those straps on there, I would have realized immediately that it wasn't sitting properly up on the tailgate, and I would have corrected it. We wouldn't be having this conversation today. But I thought, because of I had done it before, that, that I had considered the risks and that they were acceptable, and here we are, and apparently they were not. That really reminds me, as I've had a couple weeks to think about this, of Chesterton's Fence. Let's talk about Chesterton's Fence a little bit. G.K. Chesterton was a Catholic. He was a Christian apologist. He was prolific. I think he wrote this particular allegory or parable, if you might want to call it, I think in 1929. And he's famously known for this idea, Chesterton's Fence, or maybe some people would say Chesterton's Gate. And it's just, and I'm paraphrasing here, it's been a long time since I read it, but basically tells a story of a man who is exploring through the forest, and he comes into an opening, and there's a small road there, and he realizes that there's a fence across the road with a gate in it. And he can see that it seems to him that there's no use for this gate. It makes no sense, and he's inclined to basically just tear it down so it's not a hindrance to him. Well, an older, more seasoned man comes up and prevents him from tearing down the gate, and basically says to him, before you tear down this gate, before you tear down this fence, go out into the world and educate yourself. Find out first why this fence has been erected, why it's here in the first place, before you tear it down. Because you don't have all the information. You may look at it and think, well, this hinders me in my path. This makes it more difficult for me to travel or navigate this area, so that I could see no benefit to this fence, so it's just got to go. What the young man doesn't realize is that the fence didn't just pop up there on its own. It wasn't built by insane people. It was built there by someone that deemed it important enough to put a fence there for whatever reason that may be. The reason could be anything. The reason could be it was to keep out giants. It was to keep out monsters. It was to keep out invading enemy. Who knows? It doesn't make any invasive species. You know, you can go anywhere with that. But at one time in ancient history, there was a man or men that deemed it important enough to take their time and to build and to erect this fence across the road. And what the older, wiser man tells to him says, go out and learn, educate yourself, then come back. And if you can explain to me with an educated mind and with the hindsight of understanding why this fence was built and make the argument that it is no longer needed, then I will allow you to tear it down. But until then, the fence will stay. Well, what in the world am I talking about? What does this have to do with anything? You know, I thought about that. 53 years old I am now, and how many hundreds of times have I loaded equipment in the back of trucks? And you get to the point where you think that you're beyond learning. You think that you know better than the man who maybe even invented the thing, who spent countless hours loading and unloading and thinking and hearing from other people and has a vast knowledge, and things need to be a certain way for a certain reason. And those restraining tabs on there are basically a fence that was erected to protect the layman who doesn't understand or doesn't have all the facts from hurting or killing himself. You see where I'm going with this? I thought back, you know, we have a lot of fun with Safety Sally on this channel, and you can take safety too far. You can get to the point with safety where it just paralyzes a crew. I see that on the government wildland fires. You could hardly get anything done because it's just so laborious to try to meet all the criteria. But all of those fences have been erected for a particular reason, you know, so that's always the balance that we need to weigh. I remember my first time, I've always had kind of an animosity and a rebellion against safety equipment and like particular safety guards on power saws. And I thought, why is that? Because really, I mean, now that I'm using modern tools, the safeties on them are actually quite good. But when I was a boy, I remember working with my dad, and when he bought a table saw, and it had a miter saw. He had a miter saw, and it had a guard on it. It was the first time I'd ever seen anything like that, and it was poorly designed. And it was probably not, you know, the first time you try to do something, it's not always the best. And my dad was always complaining, and we're working, and he said, you know, this thing is actually more dangerous than if it wasn't here at all. And I remember he took it all apart and threw it in the trash. So as a boy, that was my mindset. What did I learn from that? Safety guards are more dangerous than not having safety guards. Well, of course, you know, and then now I'm 16, 17, and I'm working on a professional framing crew, and those guys were of the same mind, and they solidified that idea in my mind. They had pulled all the guards off of their tools as well and said the same thing. Those things slow us down. They do more harm than they do good. So that said it for me, and now I am immovable. I am anti-safety guards always, no matter what, because I've made that decision, I've moved on, and that's just who I am. I've adopted that. Not because I've actually really looked into it, not because I've actually have spent thousands and thousands of hours as a manufacturer or as a big company that knows the statistics of how many guys have cut their fingers off and can tell you, yes, safety guards do. You know where I'm going with this. But in my mind, this is what I'm thinking. And so I go forward in my ignorance thinking that I know better than wiser and better men with me than more experience than me have warned me against. The thing that makes my blood run cold, makes me shiver when I think about it, is I was probably 17 or 18 when I got my first big power saw, big professional saw. It was like a big Husqvarna 270, it was a big one. Big enough to sling a 4-foot bar, because my dad and I were building houseboats, and we were down and building log rafts, and I needed a massively powerful saw with an extremely long bar to get through these old growth logs that we were capturing as they came down and building these log rafts out of it. And so I remember buying that saw, and I bought it at a pawnbroker, and I just didn't know anything about anything. I just think about it now. You know, I thought I was so smart because I grew up working with my granddad, and we used to go out and cut firewood, and he taught me how to work on power saws and how to sharpen power saws. And he didn't have a guard on his saw because it was, you know, back in the day before all of that. What was the first thing that I did even before I started the saw? I realized, oh, what is this handle on here? And I didn't understand it, and it was, you know, I took it all off. I'm like, what nonsense. Here we go. Safety guards, you know, they're just no good. And so I ran that saw for years and years, that big, huge 4-foot bar professional power saw as a scrawny 150, 160-pound teenager with no safety brake on it. And by God's grace, I didn't have an accident. But the potential for having an accident using it in that configuration was, it skyrocketed, right? I thought I knew best. I thought at that time I knew all there was to know, enough to know about chainsaws that I could basically disregard the engineers that built the thing, that conceived it, disregard all of the statistics of how guys get hurt with them, because me as a 16, 17, 18-year-old boy, he knew better, and I was lucky to live through that endeavor. Right? So we have that. So where's the balance in life between the grizzled, hard, expensively purchased experience that comes to a man at the age of 50, 60, 70 after a life of working in the trades, compared with the new ideas of the young man coming in? Because you can get to the point where you can, let's say, for example, let's keep it simple. Let's say that you're growing up and you on the plains of Nebraska 300 years ago, one of the local Native American tribes, and then you hunt buffalo. That's what you've done. You hunt buffalo. The men before you 1,000, 2,000 years ago, they hunted buffalo, and it's done a certain way. Why? Well, because many men were killed and trampled and had terrible accidents because of not doing it the right way. And over this time, this hard-fought experience that we've learned that we learned from hunting buffalo, we pass that on to the youth to keep them safe, right? So you may not understand why you don't approach the buffalo from this direction, but I'll tell you why. Because Whitefeather got his legs trampled off because he tried that and it didn't work very well. But the dangerous part of that is that now we are constraining or harnessing the creativity that comes from the young mind. We as older people, and if you have any doubts of this, your mind is, my mind is not as capable of adapting and as elastic as it was when I was younger. And if you question this, just go online and try to get on a competitive first-person shooter game as an old man and try to compete with a 14, 15, 16-year-old with decision-making, with reflexes. You will get destroyed, right? Just techniques, you can't teach an old dog tricks. That new trick, old dog, new tricks. We have these things because they're true, right? So the dangerous part of that, of locking everything down and restraining people from doing anything a particular way, is that you might be stymieing pure genius, which would take your people or your buffalo hunting on to the next level. I mean, it could be that in your generation there is a mind that is born into your tribe that is a brilliant or a genius, that is a once in a millennium type of thinker or mind, where he can at 13, 14, 15, 16 take a look at this way that we hunt buffalo and come up and devise a way that is not only safer, but takes a lot less resources. Maybe it's a whole lot easier. Maybe you can hunt effectively with buffalo with half the number of men just because of a new technique or something new that we have thought about. But the only way that can really happen is for the men to understand, or the passing on of this knowledge, I guess, for people to working together. What we find ourselves, we don't have that tribe anymore, and we find ourselves now, had I been raised in a logging camp with men that had been doing this their whole life, and I came out with my saw and they looked at me like, bro, you took the chain brake off your chainsaw, go put it back on, this is why, it would have saved me a lot of trouble. But I didn't have that man to tell me this, because Americans, they're not about tribes so much anymore. It's about rugged individualism. It's about figuring it out. It's about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. It's about doing things on your own, making your own way in life. It's about the individual, right? But it's a difficult thing for the individual because now he's got to reinvent the wheel. And he may or may not survive the lessons. I guess is where I'm going. So I don't know. I'm just some ramblings, and that are probably fueled by the narcotics that I'm on for it hurts. My leg hurts, so I've only take about 1/3 of what they prescribe for me, but sometimes it just gets too much and I just can't deal with it. But yeah, I don't know where the solution is, but I guess for me, what I learned from this is that, what did I learn from this? What I learned from this is that these decisions that we make can have consequences that you'd never comprehend it. How quickly your life can change. You know, and I guess what a guy's got to learn from this and take from this, and what I'm taking from this, is about, you got to mitigate the risk. What is the risk? What could I lose by cutting a corner and not fastening that ramp and falling off and getting hurt, or hurt much worse than this? You know, when I realize now that when I basically have not been able to take care of myself, and I've relied upon my family to look after me and Mrs. W heavily, to bring me food, and you know, all those things that you just have never not been able to do. I've never in my life been in a position where I can't go do what I want to do. I can't hardly do anything but scoot around here on this cart. It makes you think. And I guess from this day forward, if you're entering into something and cutting corners, and the effect is a smashed finger or a stubbed toe or some scratch paint or a broken something that you can go replace, you know, maybe you do go ahead and take those risks. Maybe it's worth the couple minutes that you save. I don't know. You'll have to make that decision. I'll have to make that decision. But when you get into situations where this decision that I'm making right now, the consequences could be so severe that I'm no longer able to take care of my family. I'm no longer able to do the things that I want to do, that I've looked forward to and put in motion for the next 20 years, then that's where a guy doesn't cut corners. And I guess I'll close with this, that these rules that are in place, and you can take this Chesterton's Fence concept, or this parable, you can apply it to pretty much anything. But I also was thinking that these institutions that have stood in America, not to get political and stuff, or rules or regulations, or the way things have always been, you've got to ask yourself, before you want to abolish everything that has been built by our ancestors, that you got to ask yourself, why were these things put up? Why was this fence put up? It didn't just happen for no reason. Maybe the reason wasn't good. Maybe the guy, after he goes out and finds out who originally discovered the fence, he finds out that that fence was put up because there were blue people in the land and there were red people in the land, and the blue people thought that they were superior to the red people, and it was put up for racism, or it was put up for some nefarious thing that no longer matters anymore, and now it does nothing but be a hindrance to everyone. If that's the case, then it is proper and appropriate to tear down that fence and that gate, because it benefits no one. But if that fence or that gate has been erected to keep out invading hordes or dangerous animals, then it's important for that gate to stay. Because in tearing these things down, we may inadvertently bring a much worse calamity upon our head that we couldn't even foresee in our ignorance. Thanks for watching. May God bless you and your families. Please keep us in your prayers, and we'll see you all on the next video.